Okay, this is going to be our food service equipment. So most of you guys will have seen most of this, and probably have even cooked using some of these. And so if you have any good stories about the different kinds of equipment, I would really be curious to hear it. Okay. So one of the things that you may have noticed is that different kinds of restaurants have different kinds of equipment. Have you noticed that before? Places like a pizza place, for instance. What kind of an oven do they have that you see in a pizza place very often, Miley?
A pizza oven.
That's right. So we used one type of a pizza oven when we made our pizzas here in class. The particular kind of pizza oven that we have is called a deck oven. And in some places you'll see, we just have one deck, but some places will have multiple, have those stacked 3 or 4 high. And not only are they good for pizza, but they're also fantastic for bread because they get to have that nice hot tile bottom, and they make delicious different kinds of bread also. So you might see that in a bakery, but you might see something like that in a pizza place. The other kind of oven that you might see in a pizza place is called a rotary oven, and it's like it's on a conveyor belt. And you put the pizza in, and then it's like it's on a timer, and it just kind of conveyors through till it comes out in the end. Has anybody ever seen anything like that? Selena, have you ever seen in the back of a pizza restaurant?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, it's pretty interesting to watch, and it just works like a conveyor belt. So, but those are probably pretty specific to a pizza place. Some other things that you might see that maybe are specific to the size of the operation in for instance, like a gigantic hotel that has lots of meeting rooms and things like that. They may have some hot holding boxes where they're storing food for service. Depends on what they are serving and how many people. Places that are like quick serve probably have a flat top where they're cooking burgers and things like that. So, but again, the types of equipment that different types of restaurants have, a lot of it is dependent on the menu that they're serving and how it's being served, whether it's a walk-up or whether it's a table service. Right. So when you think about receiving, this is where we get our food when we get it off the truck, right? And when we get it off the truck, it comes in big boxes, and usually the delivery person is bringing it in on some type of a dolly or a cart of some kind. And it's usually heavy. It's usually a box that's loaded down with stuff. And so a lot of times in our receiving area, if you think about, back there by our back door to school, there's some tables set up back there, and there's some carts around. And sometimes we weigh things whenever we bring them in too. If we're going to maybe break them down into smaller parts, or we may put them into a different container so that we can store them in a better fashion. Okay. The next thing that happens, once we get our food in, we have to put it somewhere, right? And so being able to store those things safely, it's going to be really important because our food has to remain in good quality. And so things like our walk-in freezers and refrigerators, and then our reach-in freezers and refrigerators, and the shelving where we put our dry storage. All of that stuff is important, that it is in good working order, that the shelving is 6 inches off the floor. So what's the difference? Let's see. What's the difference, Megan, in a refrigerator and a freezer? Megan, what's the difference in a refrigerator and a freezer?
One keeps one colder than the other.
Tell me again.
One keeps one colder than the other.
One's colder than the other. Yeah. So I think there was a little bit of a mix up the other day whenever we were making our pizza dough, wasn't there? So a mix up between the refrigerator and the freezer. And so refrigerator is fairly short-term storage, and so we know that things in the refrigerator, if it's something that we've made, it can stay in there 7 days as long as it's properly labeled, right? But things that are put in the freezer are a little bit more long term, and so those might be things that we want to keep around a little bit longer. But not everything freezes well. Things like, let's say, lettuce, for instance. Would lettuce freeze very well? No. So the cells of the lettuce would collapse once it was frozen, and it would just be a soppy mess. And so, but things like peas freeze really well. And so there's a few things that we can freeze. And so those freezers are very appropriate for a number of things, and a good way to preserve the food, or to keep it longer than we could in other conditions. Okay, so here's all kinds of equipment. This thing right here, this buffalo chopper, this is what we can make hunks of meat into, let's say, hamburger meat, or into stew meat. And then this right here, I think some of you guys have actually used this here before, and this is called a food processor. So, Jesus, have you ever used a food processor before?
No.
So this particular one will blend things, and it will slice things and chop things. So it does a number of different things. Some of them just blend like anybody ever use like a smoothie, like a bullet blender, and made a smoothie in one? Kind of works like just a blender. And this thing will do that, but it also does things like chop and slice. So it does some other things too. Okay, here's a mixer. Now we used this for our pizza dough the other day. We didn't use the big floor model, but we used the tabletop model. Okay, but they come in lots of different sizes. We have that tabletop size that we saw that's fairly small, and then if you noticed over there by our pizza oven, there was that gigantic one that sits on the floor. Did you guys see that one? So depending on what you're making, you may have different sizes. Sometimes we use that gigantic one to make hot rolls in, or big orders of cinnamon rolls, for instance, to make the dough with. But that's for making great big, large quantities of food. The motors in mixers like this are much different than the mixers like you would have at home. The commercial mixers are actually the motor turns with a metal cog, like a wheel, whereas the ones you have at home have a belt. And so it's easy on the belt-driven ones to burn those up if you are using heavy dough, trying to knead bread and things like that. So it's a little bit more difficult to do things like that at home. So I must need that heavier duty mixer. So that's what the ones that we have here are cog-driven. Okay, steamers. So steamers look a lot of different ways. Sometimes they're like a big cabinet. Sometimes they look almost kind of like a small oven or even a microwave, but they are hooked up to a water source. You know, you can cook with steam, and steam gets really hot. Things like rice. Anybody got a rice cooker at home? Sydney, do you have a rice cooker at home?
Yes, I have a small one.
No, but I do know what they are.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of grains, things like rice, for instance, cook really nicely in a steamer. And you can also cook lots of vegetables that way. So they're really handy for for that kind of thing. So you'll see those pretty often in a food service operation. We have one here that's over kind of by the where the fryer is back here in the back. And anyway, they're like I said, they are pretty handy to have. Also, oh, by the way, we have a combi oven that is next to that pizza oven that we used the other day, and it also has a steamer in it. And so we'll be using that equipment here pretty quick, and so you can see all the different features that some of the equipment has. So broilers, we have a broiler here in the kitchen, and it's over on the other side where Miss Ann, where she works a lot of times to prepare the break food. And the one that we have is called a salamander, and that's kind of a funny name, but it's just like a broiler. So like at home when you're making, I don't know, cinnamon toast. Anybody ever make cinnamon toast in the oven at home? You guys ever do that? You made cinnamon toast, Cindy? In the oven. Well, under the broiler, if you notice, the heat from a broiler comes from the top, and then the heat from your oven, when your oven's on, comes from the bottom. And so, and that's the difference in a broiler in an oven. So the broiler has the heat from the top, and it's the same way in what we have here in the salamander. Ours is gas, and up here on the top, there's a kind of a metal pipe that has flame coming out of it, and then this tray right here is adjustable, so you can raise and lower the item that you want to brown or cook closer to the flame or further away from the flame. But there's a lot of different types of broilers, but the one that we have is a fairly small one called a salamander. Some other things that you might see, like a rotisserie, that's like what they cook chickens on at Walmart. You've probably seen those, and it looks like a conveyor that's going round and round. Well, that has a heat source. It's toward the back, and it's cooking those chickens as they go around and round. Okay, but there's all kinds of broilers. Some are contained in ovens, and some are separate units. Okay, and here's a range. So this looks pretty similar to the ones we have here at school. Most of the time it has burners on one side, and then there's a flat top griddle on the other side. Okay, and there's our griddle. Ours is all level. It's the same height, but it kind of has that look to it. And then you can cook just about anything you want to on the flat top. You can cook burgers or bacon or eggs or pancakes or just about anything. And we'll see this very frequently in restaurants, because you've got the burners over here, so things that you can cook in pots and pans, and then things over here that you can cook directly on the surface. Okay, and this particular oven here is called a convection oven, and convection has to do with the fact that it has a fan located in the back of it, and whenever these are on, that fan blows hot air over the food. It actually cooks a little bit faster than a traditional or a conventional oven. And so a lot of times if we're using a standard recipe like one you would use at home, and you're cooking it in one of these convection ovens, you have to reduce the time and temperature because it cooks hotter and faster than a regular oven. So conventional oven, that's like a home style oven that just cooks with heat. And that would also be like the one we have here in the classroom, you know, where you can open it up and we put things in it. That's a conventional oven. Okay. Again, the convection are like the ones we have in the kitchen that have the fan in the back. This conveyor oven, that's the one we were talking about earlier. That's like a pizza oven that moves slowly and it's on a timer, and you can speed it up or slow it down depending on how brown or how cooked you want whatever it is you're cooking on there. Then we talked about the deck oven. That's like our pizza oven that we were using. Okay, and everybody knows what a microwave is, right? Okay, a rotary oven. This is an interesting thing. If you ever go to a big bakery, for instance, if they are making lots and lots of hot rolls or cookies or just really about anything, they'll use what we call a speed rack. And you may have seen those speed racks in the kitchen. They're those rolling carts that have all the little slots where you can put trays. Well, in these rotary ovens, you roll these carts in there, and the top of it is equipped with a little hook that hooks onto like a kind of a claw inside the oven. And the ovens almost look like closets. And you roll the whole rack in this walk-in oven and hook the rack up to it. And then when you shut the doors, it turns on the oven and the whole thing spins. So it cooks evenly. And so you can cook hundreds of things all at once. So big bakeries like Panera Bakery, and central baking places. There's a couple of Mexican bakeries in Tulsa, and they have a central baking facility, and we've gone there and toured that before, which is so much fun. But they have, it's just an entire wall of these walk-in ovens that you roll in these carts on, and it picks it up and turns them, and they're making all kinds of delicious pastries there. All right, then you have your slow roasting oven. That is exactly what it says. It just takes a while to roast, whether it's meat or whatever it is that is cooking. And it just is an all-day cooking thing. It might be something like a smoker, kind of that effect, or it might be something that's cooking rather tough cuts of meat that takes a long time for all of that to break down so it's tender. All right, good old meat slicer. So we have one of those here, and we slice all kinds of things on it. Usually, you know, people think meat and cheese, but Selena, can you name some things, some other things we could slice on the meat slicer? Selena, can you name some other things we could slice on the meat slicer? Hey Sam, what about you? Can you think of some things, the other things besides meat and cheese that we could slice on the meat slicer?
I don't know. We don't have a meat slicer at our house.
Okay. Yeah, meat slicers aren't something that a lot of people have at home. Sometimes you might see if if you're a hunter maybe, and you process your own deer, maybe sometimes people might have a meat slicer for that, or maybe if you have animals that you butcher, perhaps. But it's not a very common thing that people have in their house. But in a restaurant, you know, we definitely use it for meats and cheese. But the other things that it does really nicely are things like tomatoes and onions, you know, because it makes some nice even, nice even slices. Yeah, definitely. So if you're making like a whole bunch of sandwiches, for instance, it works really nicely to slice the tomatoes and onions on the meat slicer. It's also nice for things like once you cooked meat, like a big roast beef or a brisket, you can put it on there and slice it really nicely, and it makes nice even slices, and you can adjust the thickness of the slice. And so it does a lot of really great things. It's one of those things that is partially clean in place. A lot of the pieces will come off, and you can wash those parts either in the sink or in the dish machine. The rest of it is what we call clean in place. And so we use our soapy water and get everything scrubbed up, and then spritz it with our sanitized solution, and then we reassemble it. So it has a few extra things that we have to do to keep it clean. You guys remember the time limit on continuous use equipment like this? How long can we use this before we have to clean it? Anybody
4
know?
hours.
What'd you say, Miley?
4 hours.
Good girl. You're exactly right. Yep, 4 hours of continuous use, and then we have to break it down and wash, rinse, sanitize everything, and then we can go again. Okay, and they're, depending on what kind you buy, some of them are that you have to push it to slice it, and some of them are actually automatic where you just put the food product in and it will slice it on its own. And so some of them are terribly expensive, and some of them are not as heavy duty. So there's different qualities out there too. This is a steam jacketed kettle. And these come in lots of different sizes. The one that we have is over there, you know, where you take your temperature whenever you come in every day, over there by the freezer. Well, there's a jacketed kettle sitting on a table right over there. And that one's a fairly small one. But there are floor models that are as big as a bathtub. I mean, they can be huge. But you can do tons of things in these. And the deal with why they're so wonderful is because they don't scorch things. This whole outside, just inside here is a layer of water, and then that water is enclosed inside of this container. So what you put in there is actually like cooking something in a double boiler. Do you know what you do, like when you melt chocolate and things like that? You don't want to get right on the heat because it will scorch. And this works a lot the same way. And you'll see these in tons of different places. For instance, like at Taco Bell, they use it to brown their hamburger meat in. You may see it in a candy factory used to melt or temper chocolate because you can adjust it. Some of these actually even cool food. And so you can set them to cool or to heat depending on the temperature of the water that surrounds it. So you can make wonderful soups. It's fabulous for making like chicken stock. So you can throw all of your components that you've been saving in the freezer, your leftover chicken carcasses and carrots and onions and herbs and spices and all of that, and throw that in there and let it cook for all day, and then drain it out. You got some glorious chicken stock. So this whole thing, this handle right here, this whole thing actually tilts forward and pours out like a big bucket. So you can put a pot or a pan in front of it and pour out whatever you've been cooking. And so the bigger ones actually have like a spigot that you can drain out what you've been cooking. And a lot of them are equipped with water so that you can fill it, whatever you're cooking, with water instead of having to carry it over. And so this is a super handy piece of equipment, and you will see this a lot out in industry. And like I said, they come in lots of different sizes. This is a tilt fry pan, and we have one of these over here in the kitchen over by the cooktop. And we've actually used this. We made chili for like 300 one day. But just about anything you can do in a pot or a Dutch oven or a skillet, you can do in this fry You can use oil in it, and we made tons of fried chicken in it. You can make chicken fried steaks in it. You can make soup or stew, but the bottom of this gets hot, so you can use it to brown or to saute. And then it's just like a big square pot that you can just do about anything. And it has a lid. If you want to let things kind of steam, you can pull the lid shut and it'll continue to cook. And also in the front, it has a pour spout, so you can crank it slightly forward where it tilts at, and then all of what you've been cooking can pour out into containers so that you can serve it. So this is a lot of our big institutions that serve a large number of meals use things like this and that jacketed kettle, because you can cook a ton of food really fast. In this, like I said, we did chili for 300 in the one that we had, so it'll make a ton of food. Okay, and everybody's probably familiar with this, right? Everybody fried French fries in the deep fat fryer before? Jalissa, have you made French fries in the deep fat fryer?
Not in the deep fat fryer, actually. I've never made it in that.
So that's one of the things we were talking about in safety. This is one of the pieces of equipment that can really get us in trouble because it fries between 350 and 360. And so we've got that oil very hot to begin with, and we know the oil is flammable. And so if for some reason that oil gets too hot, if our thermostat has a problem and it's not monitoring the temperature, it would be easy to get a fire with one of these things. So you have to be careful and make sure that everything's working properly. Okay, this is our holding equipment. This is that speed rack I was telling you about, that a lot of times whenever you're prepping things, as you get a pan full, you can slide it on your rack and just keep going if it's something that can set out that's not a potentially hazardous food. Or what's really nice about this is you can roll things easily, stacks of things, and roll them into the refrigerator. Or as I was saying earlier, a lot of bakeries use these and just roll them directly into their oven, which is really nice. This is a hot hold cabinet. So this is, we have one of these out front in the concession line. And so like on, for instance, burrito day on Thursday, Miss Ann makes up burritos and she puts them in here in this hot hold until she's ready to serve them. And then she can pull them out and put them out on the hotline. And they stay really nice just in this hot hold here. And a lot of restaurants do that if they make things up in advance and then just put it in the hot hold so that it just keeps it. You guys remember what temperature hot hold is? Anybody remember?
135 and up.
You got it, girl. 135 and up. So this machinery has got to be capable of keeping food at 135 or warmer. This right over here is called a bain-marie. Okay, and bain-marie in French literally means Marie's bath. And so, and what this is doing right here, it has water underneath these pots, and it's keeping whatever is in here warm without scorching it. And so things like, if you have a soup of the day, a soup du jour, it's keeping that soup to temperature, hot holding it at the appropriate temperature. You might have chili that day, or it might be a sauce of some kind that you're adding, but whatever it is capable of keeping food at that hot hold temperature. Okay, and so, but we call those a bain-marie. Okay, and here's some service equipment. So these are things that we are serving food. So this is just your standard hot hold here that would be like on a buffet line, or you might see a cold version of it that might be for a salad bar. One of the things that's required, see this sneeze guard that's up here above it? That's required because our health code says all food must be protected. And that's one way that we are protecting food. Right now, during COVID, we've eliminated this self-serve, and so everything is just prepared and then served either on a plate or box to go. And so we're not really even doing this right now, but when the world gets going again, we will see that again. This right here is called a chafing dish. And so if you're a caterer, or if you've been to a catered dinner of some kind, or a wedding perhaps, you might see this. This has little fuel tubs underneath here, and usually this bottom pan has a little bit of water in it, and then a hotel pan sits down in here and it keeps the food hot, so we don't have to worry about any food spoilage. Anybody know what this thing is? Unknown caller. Anybody know what this thing is? It's an espresso machine. So you guys ever had an espresso? So fancy coffees, places like Starbucks, people are into fancy coffee. And so if you have things like an Americano, or you might have just a shot of espresso, this would be the machine that you would be using. And so we'll see these out in industry quite a bit. Okay, all right, I'm gonna stop sharing. All right, so that's just kind of a basic overview of the equipment, and we have a lot of that equipment here, which we're going to start using very soon. Again, the equipment that you're using is specific to the kind of food that you prepare, and commercial equipment is very expensive, and so we always want to take care of it. And you know, whenever you're doing a restaurant startup, it's really a good thing to really consider, you know, what you're going to be cooking and what are the minimum equipment requirements that you're going to have, because the expense sometimes of trying to open up a restaurant is astronomical. And so finding multi-purpose type pieces of equipment that can do a lot of different things is a really smart thing to do. All right, guys. Will anybody have any questions or anything you'd like to know? All right. Well, hopefully, remember by 4 o'clock, I'm going to need any of your outstanding work that we were just talking about. If you, I'm going to stay on here. I'll be the last one to leave. So if you have any questions or anything that you need to ask me or need help with something, I'm on here. I can help you. Otherwise, I will see you on your next designated day to come to school. Okay. All right. You guys have a good Wednesday, and I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.